For thousands of years, humanity's greatest legends, dragons, sea monsters, giants, the Great Flood, and lost golden cities were dismissed as pure fantasy until modern science dug into the earth, the ocean floor, and ancient records and confirmed that every single one of them was real.
Across every culture in human history, people told the same impossible stories. Stories of dragons, giants, floods, and monsters lurking in the deep. For centuries, scholars called them superstition, fantasy, and primitive fear. But science kept digging, and what it found changed everything. The myths were not wrong. They were simply written in a language we had forgotten. This is the story of 8 legends that turned out to be completely real. Each one dismissed for centuries. Each one quietly, undeniably confirmed. We begin with the most feared creature in all of human mythology, the dragon. The one creature that every civilization on Earth described. No contact between those cultures, no shared trade routes, yet the creature was identical.
Myth 1. Dragons. In the ancient Gobi Desert, nomadic tribes kept finding enormous skulls in the rock. The skulls had horns, hollow eye sockets, and massive curved jaws. To anyone who had never seen a living dinosaur, this could only be one thing. Adrian Mayer, a historian at Princeton, made the connection in the year 2000. The Gobi Desert sits on one of the richest dinosaur fossil beds on the planet. Ancient Scythian nomads traveled those routes and found the fossils constantly underfoot. They described what they saw, a 4-legged, beaked creature that guarded gold. That description, the griffin, spread across the ancient world, from Greece to Persia. The dragon legend was not imagination. It was paleontology before paleontology existed. Ancient people found the bones. They described what they saw, and they were right.
Myth 2. The KRAKEN.
In 1752, a Norwegian bishop described a sea creature the size of an island. Bishop Erik Pontoppidan wrote that sailors saw its arms wrap around entire ships. For 200 years, scientists laughed. The Kraken was a sailor's drunken fantasy. Then in 1857, a Danish zoologist changed the scientific world forever. Japetus Steenstrup identified a massive beak recovered from a sperm whale's stomach. Something enormous lived in those waters, something that had never been seen alive. In 2004, a Japanese research team captured the first living image of one. Archaeteuthis dux, the giant squid, was real, and it was enormous. Adult specimens reach over 13 meters in length, the size of a school bus. The Kraken was not a myth. It was an accurate description of something very real.
Myth 3. The Great Flood.
Every major civilization in history recorded a catastrophic, world-ending flood. Mesopotamia, India, China, Greece, and the Americas all told the same story. Scientists called it a coincidence, separate cultures imagining a similar disaster. In 1997, 2 Columbia University geologists published a theory that stunned the world. William Ryan and Walter Pittman found evidence of a catastrophic ancient flood in the Black Sea. Around 5600 BCE, rising seas breached a thin land barrier at the Bosphorus Strait. 200 times the force of Niagara Falls, that is what roared through the gap. Ancient coastal settlements were submerged in days. Entire communities swallowed whole. Survivors carried that memory across the ancient world for generations. The flood was real. The memory was real. The myth was a history lesson all along.
Myth 4. Giants.
In almost every ancient culture, there existed a race of beings far larger than humans. The Bible's Nephilim, Greece's Titans, Scandinavia's Jotun, Persia's Div. For centuries, oversized human bones were reported by excavators across the ancient world. Scientists dismissed these as misidentified elephant or mammoth fossils, partially correct. But something even more astonishing was waiting in the fossil record. Gigantopithecus blacki, a real primate, stood 3 meters tall and walked this earth. It walked alongside our ancestors for hundreds of thousands of years. It was enormous, it was real, and it walked beside the ancestors of ancient storytellers.
Myth 5. Medusa and the Cyclops.
Ancient Greek sailors landing on Mediterranean islands encountered something horrifying. The beaches were covered in enormous skulls, with a single massive hole where the eyes should be. Dwarf elephant species once populated these islands in enormous numbers. Their skulls washed ashore after death and were found by Greek explorers for millennia. The Cyclops, the one-eyed giant of Homer's Odyssey, was an elephant skull on a beach. Homer's storytellers were describing something real. They simply had no other context.
Myth 6. El Dorado, or Lost Cities.
For 500 years, explorers died searching for a city made entirely of gold. The legend of El Dorado, the Golden One, began with a real ceremony. The Muisca people of Colombia performed this ceremony at Lake Guatavita each year. Spanish conquistadors saw the gold and exaggerated it into a city of solid gold walls. But in 2010, something extraordinary changed the entire story of the Amazon. LiDAR technology, laser mapping from aircraft, stripped away the jungle canopy digitally. Hidden under the jungle were cities larger than medieval London, completely unknown to science. Archaeologist Jose Iriarte called it one of the greatest discoveries in Amazon history. El Dorado wasn't a city of gold. It was an entire civilization hiding in plain sight, and it stretched across an area scientists are still struggling to fully map.
Myth 7. Mermaids and Sirens.
For as long as sailors have sailed, they have reported seeing women in the sea. Columbus himself reported seeing 3 mermaids rising from the sea near Hispaniola. He wrote that they were not as beautiful as legends promised, quite ugly, in fact. Manatees and dugongs, seen from a distance after months at sea, fool tired eyes completely. Sirens were the singing version, and modern science found an actual explanation for those songs too. Humpback whale song, filtered through a ship's wooden hull, sounds hauntingly human.
Myth 8. The City of Troy.
For 2,000 years, scholars agreed that the Trojan War was a beautiful fiction. Homer's Iliad was considered pure epic poetry, magnificent but entirely invented. Then, in 1868, a self-made German businessman arrived in western Turkey with a copy of Homer. Heinrich Schliemann had believed in Troy since childhood. Now he had come to prove it. At Hisarlik Hill in modern Turkey, his crews began to ding and did not stop for years. What they found silenced every critic who had ever called Homer a fiction writer. Not one Troy, but 9. 9 cities built one on top of the other across 5,000 years. Troy 7, burned around 1180 BCE, matched the timeline of Homer's war exactly. The burned layer, the arrows, the battle damage, the evidence was undeniable. Homer's Iliad was not just poetry, it was a memory. It was history.
Conclusion. 8 legends. 8 centuries of dismissal. 8 moments of vindication. The pattern reveals something profound about how humanity processes the world. Ancient people were not foolish. They were observing a world they could not yet explain. When they found something they couldn't categorize, they did the best human thing possible. They told a story, and that story survived long enough for science to catch up. The myths were never wrong. We simply weren't ready to understand them yet. Every culture that ever lived looked at the same world and asked the same questions. Where did we come from? What lives in the dark? What destroyed those who came before us? The answers were always there, buried, waiting, written in the only language available, the language of myth, the only tool they had, and it worked. Science does not replace mythology, it fulfills it. The next time someone calls a story impossible, remember what science has already found. The ocean floor is still 95% unexplored. There are species alive right now that no scientist has ever seen. There are ruins still buried that no excavation team has ever reached. And there are stories being told right now in places we haven't listened to yet. Pay attention to the old stories. Someone once saw something real. Because if history has taught us anything, it's that reality is stranger than any myth. The world was always wilder than we imagined. We just had to find the proof. The myths were never the end. They were always the beginning of the answer. The dragon, explained by the fossil beds of the Gobi Desert. The KRAKEN, confirmed by the largest invertebrate alive on the planet today. The Great Flood, confirmed by evidence buried 50 meters beneath the Black Sea floor. The giants,
confirmed by a real primate species that walked beside our ancestors. The Cyclops, explained by dwarf elephant skulls washed onto Mediterranean beaches. El Dorado, confirmed as a real civilization found beneath the Bolivian jungle canopy. The mermaid, explained by manatees seen from exhausted eyes after months at sea. And Troy, confirmed by one obsessed man with a copy of Homer and a shovel. 8 impossible stories, 8 real things, and scientists are still finding more. There is a cave in Indonesia with hand paintings that are 45,000 years old. Someone pressed their hand to the wall 45,000 years ago, and we can still see it. That person had a story too. We haven't found it yet, but we will. The greatest stories in human history are still waiting to be found. And when they find them, those stories won't be myths anymore either. They'll just be history. History that someone long ago was brave enough to remember. If you found this as fascinating as we did, there is so much more to explore. Subscribe to keep following the evidence, because reality never runs out of surprises. And if you know a legend that science has already proved, tell us in the comments below. Because somewhere out there, the next myth is already waiting to become history. The myth that turned out to be real is still being written.